In the last section, we finished fleshing out our action creator select book by returning an actual action from it with a type and a payload. Let's refer to our diagram again. So we're now basically at this step right here. We've made our action creator, we know it's getting called, and the action creator is returning an actual action. At the end of the last section, we also spoke about how because we wired up our book list as a container, the result of the action creator is being automatically sent to all of our different reducers. So all we really have to do now is create our active book reducer, and we're going to be good to go. So back over in our code editor, we'll create a new reducer by making a new file inside of our reducers folder. And we'll call this one reducer active book. Just like our existing books reducer, we're going to export a function from here. Now, one thing that we hadn't spoken about previously was the arguments to these reducers. All reducers get two arguments, the current state and action. So reducers are only ever called when an action occurs. So it's always going to have an action here. The state here is a little bit more nebulous. This one's a little bit more confusing. We're going to add specifically a comment to say state argument is not application state, only the state this reducer is responsible for. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, as we previously saw with our books reducer is responsible for creating this books property right here, the value that's responsible for books. So the state that gets passed as an argument to that books reducer is only the state that was previously generated by the books reducer. So in other words, we have the same state that's being produced by these reducers is flowing back into it whenever an action occurs, okay? So you can kind of imagine if we had a piece of state here and we just said state plus equals 1 every single time. Anytime an action was triggered, the state would come in, and let's just say, it's not an object in this case, it's just a number. The state would be incremented by 1. So if it starts at 0, the first time an action is triggered, we're going to add 1, so then be 1. Next time as the action is triggered, it then goes up to 2, and then 3, and 4, and so on. So in other words, again, same state just keeps flowing into this reducer over and over again, not the application state. All right, so back on topic here. Our reducer is going to be called whenever an action is dispatched by our app. This means that the function is going to get called all the time, frequently when the action doesn't concern any particular reducer at any time. So to handle the case in which an action is dispatched that we don't care about, we really need a base case to just return the current state. In other words, if we don't care about the current action, just pass the state back through. So to make this happen, as our starting case here, we'll add a simple return statement where we'll just say return state. That's it, nothing else. Next, let's do our second case, the case in which we do care about the action. Most Redux reducers are set up with JavaScript switch statements, where the switch statement is going to look at the action's type, and if it's the one we care about, we'll return a new state. So we'll write switch action.type, and then we'll say case book selected, and if it is that case, return action.payload. So we only care about the book selected case. It's the only one we really care about here. If the action type is book selected, action type is book selected, we will return the action's payload, which is the selected book. And there's one thing that we need to be aware of here. We need to handle the case in which the user first boots the app up and no book is immediately selected, right? If we boot the app up and the user hasn't clicked on anything yet, we're just going to be returning state, right? Right now, our reducer would return undefined. Redux doesn't really allow us to return undefined from a reducer. It's going to throw an error. We must always return a non-undefined value. So to handle this initial case, we'll default the value of the state argument to null. So at the top, we'll write state is null. This is a piece of ES6 syntax, and basically what it says is when this argument comes in, if it's undefined, set it to null. All right, so this reducer is looking pretty good. If the action has a type of book selected, we'll return the book that was selected, action.payload. If the action was anything else, we just return the current state. One other really important item here. It's really important that we never mutate our current state to produce a new version of the state. The object that we return from our reducer must always be 100% fresh and clean. In other words, don't do something like, instead of this right here, don't do something like state.title equals book.title and then return state. We always want to return a fresh object. Remember, our reducers need to be connected into the combine reducer statement in index.js. So let's hop on over there. Remember this file right here? And we'll import our active book reducer. Reducer active book. And then we'll add it to our combine reducers call as another piece of state. So we'll say active book is active book, like so. Remember, any key to the object that we provide to combine reducers ends up as a key on our global state. All right, so let's look at our diagram again. We've now created a reducer that caught the book selected action and returned the payload. The selected book will now end up as the value for active book on our state. Let's continue in the next section where we'll verify that everything got set up correctly.